Hello everybody and welcome back to the HLTCO YouTube channel. The subject of today's video is Lucas Paqueta, the West Ham attacker slash midfielder who of course signed for the Hammers from Lyon not so long ago. If you actually look back through the last 12 months of West Ham's life as a football club, shall we say, it's been a very interesting period to follow the Hammers. Of course, across different points of last season, David Moyes was on relatively thin ice, I think, with the West Ham fan base, and of course the 22-23 season culminated in that UEFA Conference trophy, with Jarrod Bowen racing through and slotting home to deliver the cup for West Ham and send their fans into sheer delirium. And it was Lucas Paqueta himself who actually slotted the ball through for Jarrod Bowen in that game. Over the last week or so, we have seen pretty heavy speculation linking Lucas Paqueta with a move away from West Ham United to Manchester City, and it seems from this morning's news cycle as though that is not a situation that is going to quiet down over the next couple of weeks. If anything, it's likely to ramp up significantly before the end of the transfer window, likely culminating in a situation where Lucas Paqueta does end up joining Manchester City's treble winners and leaving West Ham without two of their key men. When I say without two, of course I am referring to Declan Rice, who has made the move from West Ham to Arsenal this summer. He joins Mikel Arteta's Gunners, wanting a real shot, I suppose, at regular trophies, at regular title races, and whilst I don't imagine there are many West Ham fans that begrudge him the opportunity to move on, it does really highlight how difficult it is for clubs in that sort of middle pack of the Premier League to really make strides forward and try and disrupt those at the very top of the game. You know, it's a different subject altogether, of course, but Brighton and Moises Costa over the last week or two is a story which has dominated headlines. He has now officially made the move to Chelsea, and that £115 million British transfer record is a story which will, I'm sure, have ramifications for the rest of this campaign. But again, you know, it highlights a football club in Brighton similar to West Ham who have made positive strides over the last 12 months. They've managed to make it into European competition, but when you get a club like Chelsea knocking on the door, it's very difficult for the club themselves to stop Moises Costa from wanting to make that move, and I think that's exactly where West Ham find themselves in relation to Lucas Paqueta and Manchester City's interest. A week or so ago, I believe it was, Manchester City made an initial offer for Lucas Paqueta. That offer, as far as I'm aware, was £60 million rising to 70. There is a strange contractual sort of wrinkle, I suppose you could say, with Lucas Paqueta's current contract at West Ham. It sees a release clause of £85 million come into effect in the summer of 2024. And of course, West Ham are under no obligation to sell him prior to that date. But if you have an unhappy player in your hands and a club like Manchester City trying to lure him away, then it may well be preferable for West Ham to cut ties sooner rather than later if they can get an offer that they deem to be acceptable. And the latest information, albeit not concrete, is that they will return with a new bid. Manchester City, that new bid is likely to be £70 million in terms of initial fee, rising to 80 in achievable add-ons. At least that's the inference from the different pieces that have been put out there over the last 12 hours or so. And David Moyes is someone who, I think it's fair to say, he's a Marmite character. You know, even West Ham fans are pretty much split on the Scotsman. Yes, he has delivered them a European trophy. They are once again in Europe as a consequence of their success at the back end of last season. But I don't think there is ever universal agreement amongst the Hammers fan base that he is the man to lead them long term, because they feel as though his football is slightly archaic. I think he likes, and this has been an ongoing theme really throughout the summer window, a strong British core of players, and there has been pretty much a clash between both himself and Tim Steidten, the new Sporting Director at the London Stadium, about the profile of players they should be looking to sign across this window. But in relation to Lucas Paqueta specifically, I do feel genuine sympathy for David Moyes and the Hammers faithful, because you've got a player here who admittedly, you know, he's a high profile part of their squad. He obviously has ambitions of making it into the Champions League and to the very top of the Premier League, and there is no higher club in the land at the moment than Pep Guardiola's Manchester City. But even so, West Ham have started this season with a draw away at Bournemouth. As I say, they've already lost Declan Rice, and they are probably desperate for a degree of stability and an ongoing situation in which Lucas Paqueta is angling for a move away, of course with the transfer window still being open for a couple of weeks during the Premier League season, is far from ideal preparation for the games they've got coming up. David Moyes actually spoke post-match at Bournemouth following that 1-1 draw about Lucas Paqueta's situation. I'll read you his quote now. He said, "There is a price on everyone's head. We have had news on Lucas, but not anything to make our heads wobble. Lucas Paqueta is an incredibly talented player. I've also got to keep good harmony in the football club and ensure things are done correctly. I also understand, if you were in Lucas's position, that it's quite difficult to say, sorry, you can't join Manchester City or Real Madrid because they are two of the biggest clubs in the world, and when you're on a journey, it's hard to lose your best players." This is the sort of rock and hard place position that many clubs find themselves in. Of course, yesterday I did a video specifically about Leeds United and the troubles they've had in the transfer window so far this summer. Willy Gnonto, as far as I'm aware, is still refusing to play for Daniel Farke in Leeds, and whilst this isn't quite the same situation, they do potentially risk leaving Lucas Paqueta feeling rather disillusioned with life out of the London Stadium, and I suppose you have to draw a line under it at some stage and try and get a deal that is amicable for all parties, a fee that Manchester City are happy to pay, a fee that West Ham are happy to accept, and a deal that Lucas Paqueta can see going through, allowing him to further progress his career. And I suppose it's a conversation that could go on for weeks and weeks, if not years and years, about player power and exactly where they should fit within the ecosystem of the game. Because if you sign a contract, and it is very similar to the point I made about Willy Gnonto yesterday, but I think it is relevant to sort of pick it apart again. If you sign a contract for a club like West Ham, you are still in the Premier League, you still have European football. There is this formal release clause that comes into existence in the summer of 2024. And I'm not suggesting that Lucas Paqueta is going to throw his toys out of the pram and demand a move away or refuse to play for West Ham. But it certainly, as I say, is not ideal preparation for them going into these first few games of the season. And in such a period of change, with Declan Rice, their captain and on-field leader, having departed for Arsenal, I dare say, David Moyes is standing there pulling his hair out, because you only need to rewind to May. And West Ham fans, they were as happy as I can ever remember seeing them in terms of their online persona. I think they took huge numbers out to the final. It was all over social media. The way they won it with Jared Bowen racing in on goal was such a romantic moment for their football club. It's exactly how you would want to win a trophy, let alone a European one. And yet, in the couple of months that have passed, they have seen Declan Rice leave. They are highly likely to see Lucas Paqueta heading for the exit door as well. And of course, players have come in. You've got Edson Alvarez, you've got James Ward-Prowse. There is an ongoing conversation about Harry Maguire and other players that may well end up on the Hammers' books by the time the window closes. But it does sort of remove a little bit of the gloss from 3 months ago, because you hope that everyone is going to continue to pull in the same direction. As supporters, you live and die with your football club. You are there until death do you part. But for footballers, of course, it is a very transient situation and very, very different to being a fan of a club. And whilst Lucas Paqueta, of course, when he came in, was a huge coup for West Ham, I think the last few weeks and Manchester City's interest have really just reaffirmed the fact that there is no real emotional connection between Lucas Paqueta and West Ham United. They are the definition of a stepping stone. But then I think you can put, say, 15 or 16 clubs in that list in the Premier League. You're only really looking towards the Manchester Uniteds, the Manchester Cities, and maybe even Arsenal on the teetering point, really. When you consider the likes of Barcelona and Real Madrid clicking their fingers and immediately having players having their heads turned, it's very, very difficult to guarantee that a player is fully committed to your football club. But, with the transfer window being open at the back end of the summer, it's always going to cloud things somewhat when you do have games to prepare for. And with that in mind, I'm sure West Ham fans are feeling a little bit battered and bruised at this point in time, particularly as well when you think about the fact they managed to take the lead via Jared Bowen's fantastic strike at Bournemouth, only to concede late on. So it's not been the best week, shall we say, for the Hammers faithful. Hopefully that brings you up to date with exactly what is going on in relation to Lucas Paqueta. I would imagine there will be some sort of concrete movement, at least in the way of a formal bid from Manchester City, that will be an improvement on their previous offer over the next 48 hours or so. But right now we are very much poised, waiting for that to come in. So as I say, that's pretty much exactly as we find it at 11:17 on Tuesday morning. As I mentioned at the end of every video, I do a daily general football podcast and a daily Crystal Palace podcast published by 8:30 on Patreon. That is £3 a month if you would rather have something delivered to your inbox that is more of an overall feel. Alongside that, please do consider giving this video a like or pushing the subscribe button, because it really does help me to grow this page. And other than that, hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll speak to you again soon. Cheers.